Imagine waking up to discover your lifeline financial support is about to be cut off. That's the devastating reality facing hundreds of thousands of vulnerable people across the UK right now. In what's being called the biggest shake-up of disability benefits in years, more than 1.3 million personal independence payment claimants could lose their entire award under Labour's controversial new eligibility rules. But here's what they're not telling you: over 500,000 people are expected to fight back and win. Will you be one of them? What are your rights if the DWP tries to cut your benefits? And with appeal success rates of 67%, should you be preparing to challenge the decision right now? Before we dive into the details of this developing crisis, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our crucial updates on benefits, DWP changes, and how to protect your financial rights. The Department for Work and Pensions has released new information about PIP appeals as thousands of claimants face payment cuts in what's being described as the most significant eligibility shake-up in recent years. Under Labour's controversial plans, people will need to score at least 4 points in at least one of the activities assessed for the daily living component of personal independence payment to qualify for any support at all. This is a dramatic change from the current system, and the financial implications for vulnerable people across the country cannot be overstated. Let me break down exactly what this means in real terms. PIP has two main payment components: daily living and mobility. The daily living component has two rates: standard at £73.90 per week and enhanced at £110.40 per week. That's between £295.60 and £441.60 every 4 weeks. Significant sums that many disabled people and those with long-term health conditions rely on to cover their essential additional living costs. The latest statistics for current claims reveal a shocking picture of who might lose out. Of the 1,608,000 people currently receiving the enhanced daily living component, approximately 209,000, that's 13%, received fewer than 4 points in all activities. For the standard daily living component, which currently has 1,283,000 recipients, an astonishing 87%, that's 1,116,000 people, were given fewer than 4 points in all activities under the current assessment system. When you add those figures together, over 1.3 million people could potentially lose their PIP payments entirely under the new 4-point minimum requirement. That's 1.3 million vulnerable people who could suddenly find themselves without financial support they've come to depend on for their daily living needs. Just take a moment to consider what that means: people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and mental health conditions facing the prospect of losing hundreds of pounds every month with potentially little notice. However, there's a crucial factor that the government calculations appear to have overlooked. The Office for Budget Responsibility suggests that the actual number of people losing their PIP will be significantly less than the 1.3 million suggested by those initial figures, closer to 800,000. Why the discrepancy? Because they anticipate that hundreds of thousands of people will contest their benefit decision to secure at least one score of 4 points, allowing them to retain some level of payment. Based on these estimates, more than 525,000 people are expected to successfully appeal against the DWP over their PIP claim. That's over 500,000 people who will need to navigate the often complex and stressful appeals process just to retain benefits they currently receive. But what does this appeals process actually look like, and what are your chances of success if you find yourself needing to challenge a decision? The first stage of an appeal is what's called a mandatory reconsideration. This involves the DWP taking a second look at its original decision before you can take the matter further. It's essentially asking the same department that made the initial decision to reconsider it, a process that many claimants find frustrating and often unsuccessful. If you're not satisfied with the outcome of the mandatory reconsideration, you can then escalate your case to an independent Social Security tribunal, where your claim will be reviewed by people outside the DWP. The latest figures, released at the end of March 2025, provide some insight into how these appeals typically play out. Of the 30,000 tribunal cases that were decided in the last quarter of 2024, October to December, 18,000, that's 60%, had progressed all the way to an actual tribunal hearing. The remaining 40% were resolved before reaching that stage, either because the DWP changed its decision or because the appeal was withdrawn for other reasons. But here's the statistic that should give hope to those facing benefit cuts. Of those who did have a tribunal hearing, 59% had the initial decision overturned in their favor. That's nearly 6 out of every 10 appeals succeeding at tribunal. And when we look specifically at PIP appeals, the success rate is even higher at 67%. This means that 2/3 of PIP claimants who take their case all the way to a tribunal end up winning their appeal and having the DWP's decision reversed. These figures vary somewhat by benefit type. For Disability Living Allowance, DLA, the success rate stands at 61%. For Employment and Support Allowance, ESA, it's 52%. And for Universal Credit Appeals, 48% are successful. But across all these benefits, the pattern is clear. A substantial proportion of DWP decisions are being overturned when subjected to independent scrutiny. It's worth noting that PIP and universal credit disputes make up the vast majority of appeals to tribunals, accounting for 63% and 19% respectively. This suggests that these are the benefits where claimants most commonly feel the need to challenge decisions, perhaps reflecting issues with the assessment processes for these particular benefits. The appeal success rates have changed slightly compared to the previous year. The PIP overturn rate decreased by 3 percentage points compared to the same period in 2023. DLA and ESA appeal success rates both increased by 3 percentage points each, while universal credit success rates fell by 6 percentage points. These fluctuations could reflect changes in assessment practices, tribunal approaches, or the nature of the cases being appealed. One concerning aspect of the appeals process is the time it takes. Cases decided in October to December 2024 waited an average of 30 weeks before a tribunal reached a decision. That's over 7 months of uncertainty for vulnerable claimants. Even more worryingly, this represents an increase of 5 weeks compared to the same period in 2023, suggesting the appeals system is becoming more stretched. And with the anticipated flood of new appeals once the PIP eligibility changes come into effect, these waiting times could potentially increase even further. Another 80,000 appeals were still awaiting their outcome at the end of December 2024, adding to the backlog in the system. This existing pressure on the appeals process raises serious questions about how it will cope with the expected surge in appeals following the PIP eligibility changes. So what does all this mean if you're currently claiming PIP or you support someone who does? First, it's important to be aware of these upcoming changes and to understand how they might affect your specific situation. The new requirement to score at least 4 points in at least one activity for the daily living component could have significant implications depending on how your condition is currently assessed. Second, if you receive a decision reducing or removing your PIP entitlement, remember that you have the right to appeal, and the statistics suggest you have a reasonable chance of success, particularly if your case progresses to an independent tribunal. However, be prepared for a potentially lengthy process, with current appeals taking around 7 months to reach resolution. Third, it's worth considering seeking expert advice if you find yourself needing to challenge a decision. Organizations like Citizens Advice, disability charities, or welfare rights organizations can provide guidance on the appeals process and help you present your case effectively. Having expert support can significantly increase your chances of a successful outcome. For those wondering about the timeline of these changes, while the article doesn't specify an exact implementation date, it's clear that preparations are underway for what will be a significant overhaul of the PIP eligibility criteria. The anticipated wave of appeals suggests that many claimants and advocacy organizations are already preparing for the changes ahead. The coming months are likely to be challenging for many PIP claimants as these new eligibility rules take effect. The prospect of losing financial support that you've come to rely on can be incredibly stressful and worrying, but it's important to remember that decisions can be challenged, and the statistics show that many appeals are successful, particularly when taken to an independent tribunal. Understanding your rights, gathering appropriate evidence about how your condition affects you, and seeking expert support if needed can all help if you find yourself needing to appeal a decision. While the process may be lengthy and sometimes frustrating, the high success rates for appeals suggest that perseverance can pay off. If this video has been helpful, please hit that like button and share it with anyone you know who claims PIP or might be affected by these changes. Subscribe to our channel for more updates on benefits, financial support, and important DWP announcements that could affect your payments. And don't forget to join our community by dropping a comment below sharing your experiences with PIP assessments or appeals. Your story could help others facing similar challenges. Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to protecting your benefits. So stay informed, stay prepared, and we'll see you in the next video.